Okay. All right, we're gonna start today with a pretty famous quote from Juvenal's Satire 6, which is his longest of all of his satires. Juvenal is famous for kind of giving birth to what we would recognize as satire as we know it. So like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, The Colbert Report, I guess which is now not existent anymore. But anyway, kind of what we call like dark satire or dark humor is called Juvenalian satire. In the kind of softer form, almost more like a Shrek or a Toy Story, kind of more like smiley, cutesy. That's more like Horatian satire. So Horace develops kind of a softer, more look out for those people on the street, they just want your money. And Juvenal's more like, don't go mess around with women because women will break your heart and stomp on your face and they're all adulterers. Which is what Satire 6 is all about. So this quote actually has been used by a couple of different books to refer to a problem that we all know of. And it's interesting, the books I've seen it in, it's always referred to government or just powerful people in general. So the quote is quid custodiet ipsos custodes. Which is, we can see a couple of things. One is custodiet comes from custodio, custodiere, so long I. So fourth conjugation verb, custodiere. So looking at custodiet, that et, where's that et coming from?
Third person, is it?
Well, the t is coming from the third person singular active, yeah.
Future?
It is the future, so this is a fourth conjugation.
Oh, that's what
Ace et. Yeah, there you go. So it's extra fitting.
Okay.
I really struggle with that. So ace et. So quid custodiet, and he uses, actually, is this quid? I think he actually uses quis. I can't recall off the top of my head, so I apologize. I'm quoting this from anger and rage and memory. So I think it's actually quis. I think it's quis. I can't tell from the meter because it won't change the meter either way. I think it's quis. We're going to go with quis, and if I'm wrong, then so
Isn't in our glossary, I don't think, as a verb.
Custodio, yeah, to watch or to
of?
take care of. Yeah, exactly.
So who will take care of us?
Who will take care of, and here's this is a beautiful use of ipset. So ipset is this intensive, like Caesar himself couldn't defeat that general. So we've got ipsos custodes, and this is the noun form, a custodes. Yeah. So if custodio is the verb I watch, what's a custodes? Or what are custodes?
Watcher.
Watchers, yeah. Watchmen, yeah. So usually when this gets quoted in English, it looks something like this. They actually usually drop the future, but who will watch the watchmen? Or literally, yeah, who will watch the watchmen themselves? And so it's kind of been taken on this proverbial sense of, right, you kind of keep building up watchmen, whether that's like government oversight or famously in this graphic novel called Watchmen, and the title is taken from this, Who Watches the Watchmen? And it's all about these superheroes, some of whom have gone bad. And so it kind of takes this idea and what happens there. So anyway, kind of a famous novel from the 1980s. But so Juvenal asks, who will watch the Watchmen? And in Satire 6, what's funny is he's bemoaning his best friend's thinking about getting married, and he's saying, like, why would you ever get married? Like, women are horrible. There's tons of rope and windows around. Why would you get married? Like, might as well kill yourself. It's basically what he's saying. Anyway, it's really funny, but it's pretty naughty in some places. And anyway, so he gets to this point of like, what are you going to do with this wife? And he kind of has this fake, imaginary back and forth with his friend. He's like, I'll lock her up in the bedroom and I'll hire people to watch over her. And then that's where this quote comes in. Who will watch the Watchmen? Like, who will make sure that she's not fooling around with the Watchmen is basically what Juvenal says. So it's a pretty rough poem for women's sake. Sorry, but if you kind of want to know, there are some really interesting little bits of history. For example, the creation myth shows up from the time that men left the trees, because the Roman creation myth is that men were like oak leaves, and men came from the trees. And so you get, anyway, just some cool little tidbits here and there about gender and creation and sexuality and kind of all these different things. So this is not a poem we study in 6th grade. We wait till 7th grade. I'm just kidding. No, not at all. But it does have these like really, it's a pretty PG-13 little poem, but it is kind of fun, honestly. So if you're bored, read Satire 6 and kind of just chuckle to yourself and put your hand over your head. One other thing that I think is really interesting in the poem is Juvenal starts out the poem kind of asking what happened to all the women? Where have all the cowboys gone, or whatever? But the opposite, right? So where have all the virtuous women gone? And he answers the question in a really interesting way. He says, virtue died basically when we stopped living humbly. Like virtue died when we were able to amass so much power and so much wealth that you really didn't have to be frugal, and you didn't really have to kind of stay at your spinning wheel and watch over your children. As soon as you could hire a nanny, you could get outside of the household. And though it's focused on women, especially in the early part, Juvenal talks just as much about kind of the problems that Roman men have as kind of time has gone on. Anyway, though it's definitely focused on women because he wants his best friend to not get married and to kind of live a bachelor's life and or at least kill himself. So which is still better than getting married. Anyway, so that's Juvenal. Yeah.
When did he write?
So, that's a good question. I think it's either late 1st century or early 2nd century. Which maybe that's exactly it might be late 1st century into the early 2nd century. But yeah, he would be considered a late author or an author outside of the best period, which is kind of the Augustan era.
Yeah.
So, so he's a bit after that. So,
Okay.
getting properly crass. Though he still speaks in kind of the best era's idiom and things like that.
Okay.
So, yeah. So there you go. There's that. All right. Today, what we are going to focus on is we're actually going to take really chapters 23 and 24 together. And the essence of tonight is bound up in participles.
I'm so excited about this, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was just listening to IEW, and he was talking about participles don't count as nouns. You can't count a noun or a verb. The participles don't, so he doesn't count any ing verbs as a verb for strong verbs.
Oh, okay. Well,
so I immediately went
for
to
strong verbs,
and talk about
well,
so how do you
with
count
Latin, so we'll talk about Latin, although we
Yeah.
could kind of ask, I'm thinking of Quintilian, when you talk about style, Quintilian says, what is style except for the way that the best authors write? And I think it's the best definition of style ever. So Quintilian kind of says, you want style, read Cicero and be quiet. Like if Cicero does it, you can do it. So I think we could say, if Dickens does it, you can do it, which is, that's an author I would kind of point them to on that front. Or if Madison does it, or if, kind of anyone in that, whatever, late 18th century kind of writes that way, you're allowed to write that way. Okay, so participles. So first of all, we're going to kind of go all the way from the theory of what participles are to how they work in English and in Latin, and then, of course, how to form them. Okay, so what is a participle? A participle, and I'm going to actually just start with a verb. And that's actually a huge first hint. Ago, agere, agi, octum. And I'm going to start with this verb for a couple of reasons that you'll see eventually kind of as we walk through it. I'm telling myself in my brain that's long. It is long. Oh, good. So we're going to come back to this in a second because there are several, or at least there's one major one that a participle built off of this verb that we use every day, every week at least. So what is a participle? Well, first of all, we're going to build our participles off of verbs. So they are what we call verbals. They're not verbs, but they're verbals. And specifically, they are verbal adjectives. Verbal adjectives.
When I taught 1st grade, when I asked them for adjectives, half of them were participles.
We're participles, right? The running man, the cooking chicken, the baked ham.
I didn't tell them what they were doing, but they...
And that's fine because, and this is actually really important, and you see some of these things come through in English and in Latin, It's a verbal, just like it is in English, because we're building it off of verb parts.
Right.
Baking, baked, running. There's not a perfect passive participle in running. Ran down, I suppose, but anyway. Anyway, so they're verbals because they're built off of verbs, and they're adjectives because they actually function in both of the ways adjectives work. They work attributively, is what we call this. This is a word that I've been trying to pick up in my teaching. It's more important in Greek, but they function attributively, which means they give an attribute to a noun. So we'll go with the baked ham and the running man. Or, running man. Or, in one of the participles that we know very well, the very definition of what a human is in modern science is a participle. Homo sapiens.
We were just looking this up the other day.
Yeah. So sapiens is a participle. It literally means thinking person or thinking man. So kind of the essence of who we are is an attributive participle, which works like an adjective, and we'll talk about how to form that in just a bit. But there you go. English, we can already see it starting to happen. English has two participles. It has what usually is called a past participle. We'll see it as a perfect passive. That's a more precise perfect passive participle, and a present active participle.
Isn't that what we did with the passive thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we built those. So baked, killed, called. Whatever it is, those ed forms that we use to attribute, that we can attribute to a person. The dialed phone, the whatever. Okay. So in our English verbs, and I'm trying to think in our English dictionaries, if you look these up, they'll actually be listed third, I think, second or third. I apologize, I can't think of that off the top of my head. But that'll be this, again, the second or third form listed will be this passive participle form, the perfect passive participle form. So as a verbal adjective, it can be attributive in English and in Latin. I'll talk about what's going on in this in a second.
So in English, there can be past participles or what again?
Or present participles.
Present. And so baked would be, is that a passive?
That's past, right? Because it was baked, but
Right.
now it would be
Baking.
baking.
So it's
Yeah.
either past participle or present participle, but not passive. Did you say passive?
I'll talk about one second on
Okay,
that,
all right,
because
sorry.
we're going to talk about the theory behind it, but that's going to come up. It also, as an adjective, can work as a substantive. So, for example, if you had, golly, who's it? This is Shakespeare. Amantes sunt amentes. Lovers are lunatics. Amentes. So, amentes here is, it's actually an adjective. It looks the same as amantes, but amantes is literally loving, nominative, plural. But since there's no adjective, we can figure out that it's, homines amantes, loving people, or people, lovers. Lovers are lunatics, is how it's often kind of brought over into English. Lovers, who is that? Those are the people who are loving, the loving ones. By the way, lunatics, that comes from the word moon?
Yeah.
You go crazy.
Like a
right?
dog calling at the moon.
That's right. So, it can be as a substantive just like an adjective can. So it can either modify a noun or it can stand alone and kind of act like a noun as a substantive or a substantival. Okay? As a verbal, it's built off a verb, and as an adjective, it can act like an adjective in either of these roles. It also could be predicate. We are loving, although that's usually more of a helping verb than it is a proper participle in Latin.
In lovers or lunatics, is one of those more like an adjective?
Maybe lunatics, you could say lovers are loony, I suppose, but
But you're just
No.
calling that a substantive. You're saying lovers is because it's a verb that's made into a noun.
that's right.
Oh,
So
I see.
it's loving
Yeah,
ones,
right.
amantes.
Lunatics in that case is just a...
That's
Yeah.
that's actually an adjective. Yeah, lunatics, like loony is kind of how it comes
Is
through.
it an adjective or a predicate?
No, it's a
Nominative?
predicate.
This is a predicate noun, sorry.
Predicate noun, yeah.
You see it as a predicate noun in Latin, it's crazy, is what it is. Lovers are crazy, but anyway.
Oh.
Just one letter difference between lovers and crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so it's a verbal adjective, that's what it is. Probably the most challenging bit about this is how do participles work? And we kind of have to tap a little bit into Albert Einstein here to understand participles. So you know something in grammar is heavy when you have to use Albert Einstein to enlighten what you're doing. Okay, so the big challenge of participles is what's called the relative time of participles.
I'm so sorry. I'm just kind of still confused.
You want me to change that?
Substantive? No.
Oh, okay.
The substantive seems like a noun to me. Is
It
superlative
is.
verbal
That's all it
adjective?
means. That's all it means. So it'd be like saying Superman does good. Superman bona fucket. And what you're doing is you're saying he does good things.
Okay.
Bona. So adjectives can be they can act like nouns basically.
Okay.
And they do that.
So
When
what
they're
is this?
standing alone, kind of.
Yeah, standing alone. So in the Terence quote, Fortuna fortes joet.
Okay.
Literally, fortune favors braves. Brave what? Well, fortes viros or fortes homines or something like that.
That's what lovers is.
That's exactly right. It's the same. It's the
Thank
same
you.
construction. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So this is pretty common to let adjectives stand for like a generic noun.
Right.
And it's actually something that we wish we could do in English more so, is put an adjective in the neuter or put it in the feminine or put it in the masculine and let it kind of stand by itself. Instead we have to like throw away a word, right? Like brave people, brave ones, brave men, brave,
The
you know.
bold and the beautiful.
The bold, yeah, there you go. The bold ones,
They're like
the beautiful ones, right?
Right.
Beauty and the beast. Well, beast is a noun, but beauty isn't, right? It's
But it's standing.
a beautiful woman. No, beauty. No, that is a noun. Never mind. It is a noun.
Yeah, the young and the restless. It's all these
The
like.
young and the restless. Good. The young ones and the restless ones.
The level of
That's,
culture
that's right. The more, what are those things called? Soap operas. The more of those we can get in, I think that's really the essence of relative time. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So this is what I find, these are the two big challenges. The first is that participles work on relative time, and the second is that participles, how voice works in a participle. Okay. So before we talk about that, I want to talk about the three tenses of participles in Latin. English only has two. Latin has three. So in Latin, we have a present participle, a perfect participle, and a future participle.
Hey, but these aren't that passive thing that we talked about.
Now hold on just a second.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right.
It all sounds so familiar.
So there's a present active participle in English and in Latin. There's a perfect passive participle in English and in Latin. And then Latin has a future active participle and a future passive participle.
So the ones you checked are in
Exist in Latin.
Okay.
In English has no future participles. We use relative clauses. Okay, so that's what we're about to talk about. First, we're going to talk about the way tense works in participles. So we kind of take a step back for a second. We think about tense. What would be your definition of what tense is?
When
So for
it
example,
happens?
yeah, when it happens. And really, the best answer is to say that tense involves two things. It involves the time of the verb and what we call the aspect of the verb. So for example, the imperfect and the perfect and the pluperfect are all past tenses. They all happen in the past. But what's different is not their time necessarily, but it's the how of their action. So a perfect verb is usually used to indicate a simple action. I saw the man while he, imperfect verb, was running down the street. So an imperfective verb it indicates a ongoing or repeated action. Every day I walk my dog in the morning, called an iterative action. Then you have the other aspect that we see would be the pluperfect. It's extra well done. I had woken up when I saw the man who was running down the street. Now, all of those time-wise are past tense, but their aspect is different. So when we talk about tense, for most verbs, not a participle, which is a verbal, we're talking about two things: when they happen and how they happen. Okay, so that's called time and aspect. With participles, though, and I don't know if this makes them easier or harder, to be honest, they have no absolute time. They don't have a set time when they happen. They always happen relative to something else. And we can illustrate this same thing because English participles actually work the same way. Watch. I saw the running man. I see the running man. I will see the running man. No matter when I am seeing, when is the man running?
Depends on when
At
you
the same
see.
time.
Okay, but it's at the same time, right? So depending on when I see, the present participle is
It's like
present
a snapshot.
relative to that time.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like Einstein, I think what unlocked the theory of relativity for him is he was on a train, right? And he realized when I'm sitting on a train, I'm traveling at a certain, miles per hour or whatever, but I feel, and it looks to me like I'm sitting still and everybody's moving past me or, going backwards or whatever it is by me. Participles are working the same way. They're always, so to speak, on the train. Present participles are on the train, happening at the same time, in English and in Latin. So if we were reading a historian and he was talking about, in that winter, Caesar marching to Gaul. So he's talking about his marching happening at that time. Present tense. Okay? So it's a present participle, which means that it happens at the same time. Okay? At the same time. Relative to the verb that's setting it up. Relative to the verb. Perfect passive participles, and here again we could think about English. I ate the cooked ham. I eat the cooked ham. I will eat the cooked ham. When is the ham cooked?
Previous to when you...
Previous to my eating, which hopefully, right? I will not eat the cooking ham. That would be, that would actually be nonsensical. That's another comment right here in a second. Okay, so a perfect participle always happens before the verb. So its relative time is before the governing verb. Always, always, always. Before. So it's a perfect participle. It's already done in the time frame that that we have in mind. And if the present happens at the same time and the perfect happens before, when does the future participle happen? After, okay. Now this we don't have in English. The closest we have is like a phrase. So here we go. I boarded the ship about to sail. I board the ship about to sail.
So you're having to use a prepositional
That's
phrase
exactly
too.
right. So, or you could do a relative. I board the ship that is about to sail.
Yeah.
But either way, in English, what we're doing is using a phrase or a whole relative clause, a ship that is about to sail, to communicate two words in Latin. I will board the ship about to sail. So the future participle relative time, it's always going to happen after whatever that tense the verb is, or whatever that main verb or governing verb is happening. Okay? Relative time. Comfy so far. And again, this helps because English, we basically do the same thing. We just don't have a future participle. Okay? But you can kind of make sense of it. All right. So that's one thing that's kind of tricky. The second thing that's tricky is the way that voice works with participles, present, perfect, and future participles. Okay. So normally when we think of voice in Latin, we think of active voice and passive voice. Greek has middle, Latin doesn't really have that going on. So an active voice sentence, if you saw an active voice sentence, what does that mean that the verb is active?
The subject is doing the action.
Good. So I love dogs. I, subject pronoun, love, transitive verb, dogs, direct object. So with an indicative or subjunctive, whatever verb, active voice means subject does the verb. What does a passive voice mean?
It's being done to.
It's being done to the subject, right? So, I am loved by my mom. I am kicked by that boy. Whatever it is. So the subject receives it if it's passive. The subject produces it if it's active. This is what's tricky. Participles are verbal adjectives. They're not verbs. They're not verbs. They're verbal adjectives. So what we've got here is not, for example, a subject that says, I love Judy, or I am loved by Judy. The noun being modified is the thing doing or being done to. Okay? So let's look at a couple of these. Just take a couple of samples. Where amans. And I'm going to do these in the same order. I'm not going to mess with the word right now. Where amans. The loving man. He is the man who loves. The loving man takes care of his children. Versus, say, where amatus. The loved man. Now, the noun being modified by our verbal adjective, this is a perfect passive participle, it's receiving the love. We could do this with more violent examples. Caesar killing the Gauls, or Caesar being killed, or really having been killed by Brutus.
So what are those endings? Like the...
We're going to come to that and the kind of the how to build it. But the endings actually are really nice. They are so nice for us in English.
I just didn't know if we were supposed to already...
Yeah, not yet. No, not yet. You're fine. Yeah, I'm just doing these in order. So present, the active, the man who's loving, the loving man. And it even could take an object. The vir amans feminas, the man loving women, or the man who loves women. Again, in English, we'll often have to put that into relative pronoun, or into a relative clause. Versus the man beloved by someone. Okay? Perfect, it's happened before, and it's passive, meaning the noun being modified receives it. And then we have two futures, both a future active and a future passive. So the future active would look like this. Where amaturus, the man about to love. He's not there yet, but he's about to love that girl. Again, he's active. He's the one who's doing it. Versus the man who is about to be loved. The man amundus. I feel like I'm spelling this wrong. Amundus. Okay, that's right. Okay.
Can you go
The
back
man
to
who's
the perfect?
about to be loved. Yeah.
The perfect, that's not passive, is it?
It is.
Oh, it is
So the
passive.
perfect is only passive.
Oh,
The
right,
present
you
is
said that.
only active.
Got
Yeah.
it.
And you can think of our good buddy Homo sapiens, which is the thinking man, the man who is thinking. So that's a present active participle.
Right.
Okay? All right, so let's talk about how to make these, and then we can see that that's actually kind of helpful to us as English speakers. All right. So we'll go through, I'm going to now flip this, and I'll put X's in the ones that don't exist. X's are now in the ones that don't exist. All right. So the present active participle, the way we make it is we go to, I need to write a little larger. I'm going to erase this. We go to, for our present active participle, we go to our present stem, or if you want to be even more precise, what I call the imperfect stem. And we'll see why, actually we see why in the word homo sapiens. That's I erased it. That's a fourth conjugation verb that, just like in the imperfect, it takes the IE. Okay, you can see that in just a second. Okay, so we take our present stem, which basically means we go to our second principal part and we chop off the RE. And for this imperfect or present stem, we have three options. Just like in the imperfect, we could have a long A if it's a first conjugation verb, like amo amare. We could have a long E if it's a second conjugation verb, like maneo manere, or a third non-I stem, a third regular. So we've got age here. Or we could have an I long E, which is what we have in fourth conjugation verbs. Like people who are listening are the audiens. Literally listening ones. The audiens. Or, in the case here, of thinking ones, sapiens. Or the people who are capturing you, they would be your cupiens. Okay? So we have three options, a long A for first conjugation, a long E for second or third regular, non-I stem, and an I long E for fourth and third I stem. And to that present stem, now we're going to treat it like a third declension adjective. We're going to treat it like it's a third declension adjective. Because we have to be able to decline these adjectives, right? Because they're verbal adjectives.
Can I ask a question? So for the passive perfects, we treated them like first or second.
We will, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
We haven't gotten to that yet, but yes, we will actually. Actually, all the rest of these we're going to treat like first or second. Okay? So this is kind of nice for us, and once we know what we're looking for, it'll start to jump out at us. So we're going to treat it like a third declension adjective, and the nominative singular ending is ns. So nominative singular is ns. So I'm going to take ugo, ugere, so I've got age plus ns, agains. Agains. Literally, the one doing something. Which comes up now, because now we get to see people who work for the FBI and do the FBI's work are the agentes, agents. Literally, the doing ones. That is what an agent is. And everywhere else, so the nominative singular, that's our X form, right? X, is, E, M, E. Everywhere else, what we have is an NT. So most of the time, actually, when we see our present active participle, we are going to see an NT. So you see present active participle, except in the nominative singular. So everywhere else, we see this NT, NT all the way through. Okay? So agains is our X. X is E, M, E, or E, X. Agentes, agentium, agentibus, agentes, agentibus, agentes. Okay? Decline it like a third declension adjective. And we have to decline it like an adjective because it has to match a noun. It has to match a noun. So for example, if I gave money to the man doing sin or crime or something, we would give it to hominy, sclera crimes, agenti. To the man doing crimes.
Is that a neuter? Or?
It's a neuter plural, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the present active participle, the nice thing is everywhere except for the nominative singular where it's ns, it actually has an nt. And it kind of starts to jump out at us. So that Shakespeare quote, oops, not agentes, amantes, lovers, amantes, amo, amare, long A, NT or ND anywhere kills the macron in front of it, and then XSEMX, ace, amantes, lovers. So for example, if we had many people, we would have homines sapientes, thinking people. Although usually I feel like in America we read that as if it's plural. All of the Homo sapiens.
Mm-hmm.
No, nominative singular, NS.
So you would change it to sapientes?
Taste, yep. Homines sapientes, yep. Thinking people. More, please. Plus. All right.
So you keep saying Shakespeare's, but then put it in Latin. Are you translating it, or is that commonly translated in Latin as well?
I think
Did
that's
you copy
commonly
it
done
for
in
somebody
Latin.
in
I think it's
Latin,
kind
or-
of just one of those funny word plays because it's just an E versus an A. Amantes sunt
So
amentes.
somewhere in the last 500 years that was done, or did
I
he
guess.
copy it?
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know, I
Curious.
came across that and it was attributed to Shakespeare.
I don't think he wrote it in Latin. I mean, he could
Probably
have,
not.
I guess.
He could.
But
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. He probably stole it from Juvenal. I bet. Perfect passive participle. So the big thing to remember about present active participle is NS or NTIS or third declension. Perfect passive participle. Remember, it's perfect, so it happens before the action of our verb, and the noun being modified receives the action. And the way we build this is we go to our fourth principal part called the supine. Go to the supine, and when you chop the off of the supine, that is called often the participial stem. So the participial stem. Or if you want to, fourth principal part minus the which will always be there. So we would have oct, or oct, sorry, long. Oct. And all we do to this now is add our first and second declension endings. So, one that, for example, our students meet in their first chapter of Oxford Latin, they meet a participle built off of the verb paro, parare, paravi, paratum. And the book introduces them to it as paratus, parata, paratum, readied, prepared. It's an adjective. It works like an adjective. Parati sumus. Literally, we are readied. We are prepared. We're ready to go. Okay? So it's used so often as an adjective, it almost kind of starts to straddle the fence between the two. So perfect passive participle, it's going to happen before the action of our verb, and it's the verbal action is going to happen to it. So for example, a femina parata, a ready woman, a prepared, she's readied, which usually we just say ready in English. We don't have to say readied, but that is the literal kind of force of it. She has been prepared. She has been readied. Okay.
so you take off the but
Yeah,
then
you
if
drop
it's in
the
the accusative or if it's a neuter, it has an anyway. You're adding.
That's
more.
right. That's right.
Okay.
So this is actually a different form called the supine, which is used for purpose. So it's a little that's kind of its own thing. But actually, I just came up. There's one grammar that actually lists it like it were an adjective, lists it as octus, but I've only ever seen that once. Never ever have I seen that before.
But it'll look identical when you add it.
That's right. That's right. If it were neuter, the sky acted upon. Caelum octum.
Okay.
I wonder if that's related to the German. I don't know. Probably. All right. Future. All right. The future active is really nice and easy to see. Very, very nice. Okay? So how we build it is for the future active, again, that means that it's happening after our verb, relative to our verb, and the noun is going to be doing the action. It is the actor. From agere egi actum. It is the doer. Okay? So future active means, how we build it is, we go to our participial stem. So again, fourth principal part, drop the so oct. We add because our word future is a future participle. About to be is what that is. It comes from the verb sum esse fui futurum. It is our word future is a future participle. Okay? So every time we see a future participle, it is going to have this you are that just kind of screams, I am a future participle. So we took our stem, oct, tour, about to be done, or something like this. We'll see. And then we add to it our first and second declension adjective endings. So, for example, if we said, viri labores acturi. So the men about to do their work, or about to do their tasks, walked to the shore, or whatever it is. Okay? Because remember, these are just participles. These are not the main indicative verb in the sentence. Okay? They really don't work that way. Sometimes they do. But not today, they don't. Okay? So the men about to do their jobs, whatever, walk to the city center. Ablative to the forum. Okay? So you see that ur, and you think future. You see nt, you think present, nt, active participle. Okay?
And what's the perfect passive? There's no like.
There isn't. There's nothing nice for that, unfortunately. Okay? All right. Sorry. So I should just go fourth, PP, and endings. In the future, the main thing you want to think of is that ur, future active. The future passive is the one that we'll see is kind of the most challenging. It's pretty much the most tricky. The future passive participle, and just hold your question for just a second on this one, because I know it's going to happen, is also called the gerundive, or the gerundive. Not the gerund. Not the gerund. The gerundive, or the gerundive. And both pronunciations are appropriate, or correct. Sorry, whether they're appropriate or not. All right. Now, why it's helpful to remember that is because the ND is going to come through in every one of these forms. Okay? And this is where the verb ago, agere, egi, actum is so helpful. What do you call the list of things about to be done today?
Your action list.
Agenda.
Your agenda. There it is. That's a substantive future passive participle. Literally, the things about to be done, or the things that need to be done. Okay? So the future passive participle often implies like an obligation. I need to do these things. They are agenda. Literally, agenda. Things to be done. So what we do in memorizing or keeping the word agenda in mind actually pretty much tells you exactly how to build it. You go to your present stem, or your imperfect stem. Again, there's that either long A, long E, or I long E. Okay. Present stem, or again, the imperfect stem, because you're seeing those three vowel options. So here we would have age plus nd. And that's where we can remember it's the gerundive, nd. And you can always remember the gerundive is an adjective. It's a future participle. A participle is a verbal adjective. The gerundive is an adjective. The gerund is a verbal noun. Not the same thing. So plus nd, so now we've got again, because nds or nt's anywhere kill macrins. I just had a student today, one of the sixth graders, asked me, when are we ever going to need to know about nds killing macrins? It's coming! It's coming! So here we are. The future passive participle has these NDs. And then we add the first and second declension endings, depending on what we have. So for example, we could have ships about to set, or pardon me, about to be, what could happen to a ship? It could be destroyed, sank. I don't know the Latin verb for sank off the top of my head. Burned. There we go. Naves, and naves are feminine, just like ships in English are feminine. They're always female, and spaceships and everything. Naves, burn is arsi, ardeor. Oh, that's deponent. It'll work the same way.
But about to be sailing.
Ardendi. Well, no, because it's passive. It has to happen to them, yeah. So these are, oops, not addendi. Although addendi, there's a Latin, look at all your math terms. Addenda, things to be added.
Addendum.
Addendum, something to be added. Addends, subtrahends, dividends. All of these are gerundives. Thing to be multiplied, thing to be divided, thing to be subtracted, thing to be added. All of them are gerundives. Every single one of them. Ardendi. Ships about to be burned. Again, because it's in the future, it hasn't happened yet, and it's going to be passive in its relationship to its noun modified. Okay. Ships about. So if you can remember the word agenda, remember your ND, and that this is also called a gerundive, and that'll help you with that. Okay? So almost all of these, all the exercises here, they just work on participles. Okay? One of my favorite participles comes from a guy named Saint Ignatius. And Saint Ignatius tells us this. Gloria Dei est homo vivens.
Glory of God is a man fully alive.
That's right. The glory of God is a man living, right, fully alive, and that's it. Yeah. So often, and actually that quote's a good example of this. Often in English, we have to kind of make a decision about how we're going to translate these participles because sometimes it's simple. You know, we saw the man running, the running man. Sometimes it's not so easy. So sometimes we'll have to use clauses. The glory of God is the man who is alive, or who is living, or the man fully alive, or something like this. So we have to, how do we bring out what's kind of expressed in Latin in a pretty concise way, usually. Latin it can be verbose, loquacious, but it can also be extremely concise. And participles really get at the essence of that, contrasted by English. All right, we have time to talk about a really cool use of a participle. So I just have to push on because this month, it'll just be like participle month. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to get them all. I'm going to get at least one of them because it's really cool. If you ever read anyone who is educated on the classics, who knew their Latin and Greek, they will do this all the time. So John Milton's Paradise Lost is a great example of an author who does this all the time. In Latin, it's called absolute. But in Latin, what we'll do is we'll use what's called an ablative absolute. Ablative absolute. I might be overreaching, and if this is too much, it's okay. We're not going to do this chapter this month, 24, because we're not going to get to all of it. But I want to just introduce it and kind of get the waves up on the beach a little bit, and then we'll take them back and introduce it again. Because this is actually one of the most challenging things that the Romans did with participles. All right. So what an ablative absolute is, do you remember the phrase that was absolute in that poem that you asked about? It was in the Paul Revere's Ride, and it stood absolute.
Yes. No, it's in the...
See if you can come up with that. I'm going to talk about what it is.
Okay.
Okay. So two things. One is it's called the ablative absolute. Greek actually uses the genitive absolute, but that's the only difference. The ablative absolute means that it's going to be in the ablative. Ablative absolute. And what we have is usually, almost always, a noun or a pronoun and a participle in the ablative. I don't have to capitalize ablative. And it's absolute because what it does is it's not grammatically connected with what follows. It stands apart from it. Not in that it's not related at all, but it's not grammatically a part of it. It's not a subject, it's not a direct object, and almost always it sets up context. So for example, one line in Livy that I came across here, his transactis. This comes from transago, transagere, transagi, transactum. And Livy breaks his chapter, and at his new chapter, he starts with this phrase, hek haik hak, Here it is, his in the ablative, transactis. And when we come to an ablative absolute, we usually translate it temporally. So this is usually translated, when these things had been accomplished, or when these things had been done. Because it's not grammatically going to have anything to do with what comes after. But what it does almost always is kind of set the stage for what's going to follow. So in the context of Livy, when or after these things, because that's a perfect participle, after these things, and he's talking about Scipio's preparations to go to Africa and fight against Hannibal. Or actually fight against Syphax and Hasdrubal, but that will bring Hannibal back to
So is the participle just after these things had happened?
Yeah, had happened. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's what transactis is.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So, and actually, here's a beautiful example of the compactness of Latin. His transactis, with these things done, or after these things have been done, or when these things have been done, or completed, or whatever. And then how that has to kind of stretch out for us in English. Do you remember the phrase in the poem? What is it?
I have to say the whole, so it's like the last stanza, and it's the connection between the first and second sentence in the last stanza. He's the last stanza. Can you, Rose, do you know? I'm like,
Oh, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm sorry, because I'm not in that mode right now.
That's all right.
But so through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness and knock at the door, and a word that will echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed in the midnight message of Paul Revere. For born in the night wind of the past was the one I asked you about.
Oh, right.
Because it's
Born
not
on the night
actually-
wind of the past.
Because it seems like it's referring back to something, but that
Yeah.
was the previous sentence,
Yeah,
so it should
yeah.
be, like I was thinking it should be like completed somewhere, and it never
Yes.
felt like it was,
Yes.
what is being born on the night
That's
wind,
right.
and it was referring back.
That's right, and that's why it's absolute, because it's not connected to something else in here.
Yeah.
And again, it's contextually a part of it. It's being born, or it's been born on the wind. But what? Well, there's nothing outside of that phrase that it's modifying. We kind of have to supply it, and you kind of see that here. After these things had been done, and you kind of go, well, what things? Oh, the things that had happened in the previous 3 paragraphs. So that's called an ablative absolute. Next month, we'll probably do chapters 24 and 25, because we can. But this is a very common way that the Romans would use a participle, is starting a sentence or starting a paragraph or a chapter in a book or something like that with this ablative couple of a noun and a participle in the ablative.
Like, it's confusing because I feel like my brain can't quite wrap around this, but it says after these things have happened, but how is that a perfect passive, which is supposed to be like happening before the verb? Like what?
Oh, so we would need another verb, right?
Does that make sense?
He
what I'm
marched.
asking?
So that's a future passive?
No, so
it's a
after these things, what
That's
his
a perfect
preparations,
passive.
he then marched.
Okay.
So these things had happened is previous
They
to
happened
his marching.
before.
That's right.
But it's
That's right.
confusing because it's after and it's March.
Yeah, if you wanted to say when these things had happened, that's fine
Okay.
too.
That's right, because it's a supine, the actum plus
That's right. That's right.
the third.
Is. Yeah, usio e orum
I'm
is
sorry.
os
That's a
is.
second. Okay.
Yeah, a second. So for our, as just a
It would-
reminder, the present active participle is going to act like a third third
Okay.
declension. Everything else is going to act like a first and
Just a
second.
second.
So it's kind of nice.
And if it had been future, I would have seen an or an n.
That's right. So it would be transacturi or something like, or transacturis. When these things were about to happen, or about to be done, transagendis. There we go.
And they
Build it.
use and they go back to the present stem.
That's right. That's
Is
right.
it-
So
Do both of them or
fourth
it-
principal part.
Wait, so
Present stem. Present stem.
that's
So
weird.
second principal
I was
part,
on-
second principal
Yeah.
part. second, fourth, second.
Yeah.
Like, I want it to be more organized. I want all the passives to be
I know.
defined.
Or you want all the
All
futures
the
since they're
actives
technically in
to
the
be-
present stem
Yeah.
to build off the same. Yeah. It all goes to pot.
Okay.
The participles just.
Can you just read
Break
it
it.
one more time?
Yeah.
Like, okay, like with the before and the after.
Yes.
I was still. I can't
That's
wrap
okay.
my head around it.
That's why it's hard. So like, I remember, these were like my 7th graders, and I remember drawing the tense train. And I wish at the time I had like a little camera I could take a picture of it, because I've never been able to redraw this majesty that was the tense train. Present participles always happen at the same time.
So the participles happening at the same time as the verb.
As the
happening.
verb, that's right. And if you want to think of it as like the governing verb, right? It's the verb that the participle is relative to.
Happening at
Think
the
of your
same time.
chemistry electrons.
Verb.
It's hovering around that particular nucleus.
Okay. And the participles happening.
So I get so excited when I can speak any kind of science, anything,
Yeah.
which I can't. Okay, so present is at the same time. The man sitting in the chair. I see the man sitting in the chair. Perfect happens
The
before.
participle happens before the.
That's right. I eat the cooked chicken. Right?
Is it
Because
already
it's been
was
cooked. That's right. That's right. It's been cooked. Which is what's funny is if you say I eat the cooking chicken, it means the chicken is cooking.
So our perfect participle
'Cause it's
would
active.
be ed.
That's right.
Okay,
Our
and
perfect
then our
passive participle.
present would be ing.
ing,
Okay,
but not the
and then-
gerund ing.
No, yeah. I got
Running
it.
is
okay.
fine. Okay.
And then in the future.
Future is going to happen after.
So give me an English example again.
You have to use a relative
prepositional
clause.
phrase.
Yeah. So like,
Okay.
we'll board the plane, or we're running toward the plane about to take off, and that's that future element of it's about to happen. It's preparing to happen. It's almost going to happen. Or
So the
we did not board the plane, or pardon me, we did not board the ship that was about to sink or about to be sunk. A German submarine or something. Sorry, Germans.
I need to like
Yes.
go in a dark
Well,
room.
and that's the main thing I would say. Like as you're going through these exercises, really try to think clearly in your mind
Like, I have to get it.
what is happening. And the pictures help. The pictures help of, okay, the man, think of the man living, homo vivens. He is living. He is doing this living. He is present active participle. Homo vivens.
Or Homo sapiens, right?
Or the thinking man. Yeah, not the thought of man. That would be homo sapientis.
And then can you give
The
me
man thought of.
like one example for the perfect? Because that's my example for the present. How about one example for the perfect?
Oh, in Latin?
Yeah.
Oh,
That I would
golly
know.
days.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I mean, you go with paratus, right? Prepared, readied.
Correct.
Yeah,
I like that because I know that one.
yeah, there we go. And there's a lot of those. Monitus, warned. Territus, terrified.
Oh yeah.
These are all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
passive participles. And again, Oxford introduced them as adjectives, which is really helpful when they
That's
learn the
helpful
perfect
because
passive
that
participle.
makes sense,
Yeah, because then it's terrified. I was terrified.
Right.
Not terrains, terrifying. I'm terrifying someone, but rather I'm
I am
terrified. Yeah,
Perteritus, is that
yeah, territus. Mm-hmm.
perteritus? What about that?
That's synonym. Yeah, like a more like terrified, like
But it really is a
scared out of my
participle.
wits. Yeah. It's territus, kind of thoroughly terrified.
So
And
is
then
it
do
perfect
you have-
passive then?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have one for the future?
I mean, the word future.
Just future.
Yeah, is one.
Oh, futur.
Futurus, yeah. So your principal parts of the verb to be are sum. Oops, pardon me. And again, these are irregular. They don't look right.
Oh
Yes,
yes.
futurus.
Oh yeah.
So sum esse fui futurum. Yeah, there we go. So what's weird about this is you actually don't drop the ending because it's already in its future participle form, future active participle. So that's the exception, but our word future comes from the future active participle. Okay. And then future passive, remember the gerundive, which is an adjective and an nd adjective ending.
So
And agenda.
and agenda come from the
Yeah.
same.
Agenda, addend, subtrahend, minuend, yeah, they're all Latin. Yeah. Radius, circumference, diameter,
Wait,
that's Greek.
No, wait, radius and circumference, radius.
Oh, radius. Oh, sorry, it's not one of these. Radius just means a spoke on a wheel.
Well, radius.
So, so I know like a lot of derivatives from Latin come from
Yes.
the supine. And
Yeah, they
is
do.
that because of the participles?
Probably. Just because it's
I'm
used so
always
often.
curious.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, in
ton
the
of
earlier
them.
levels, we don't use the supine
Yeah,
at all. So
yeah.
it's like it's kind of funny that that's the most common one to go.
Probably
to.
most of them come off of the third, but the fourth for sure is the most common. No doubt. No doubt. Yeah, passive even. You know, it's funny, even the word active comes from ago, agere, egi, actum, doing, versus passive, patior, pati, passus, to literally to suffer something. Something comes at you and you passus, you suffer it, endure it. So passive comes from the word for receive, the passive participle. And active comes from the active participle. Actuaris. Okay. All right, participle party.
My brain just exploded.
This is crazy.
That's good.
I think